Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Martin Dreyfus Show, and welcome back to our continued coverage of the Russia and Ukraine war. Today we're going to be watching a video that gives us an all-around update of the war, everything from Crimea and its implications to Finland, Lithuania, and Poland, all kind of reinforcing their armies and potentially preparing to go into the war. We're going to be looking at drone warfare, cluster ammunition, pretty much every aspect of the war all in one video to kind of give us an overview of what we're going to be getting back into as far as coverage. I will also be making articles and maybe sourcing some interviews for those articles that will come out periodically, and I will link those as those come out. But without any further ado, we're going to get right on into the news. So let's go ahead and do that.
Hello my friends and welcome. As for the front lines, we have the confirmation today that Ukraine was able to regain the territory that Russia took before. Awesome job. So just a quick update, you can see that there is just a color change for today. The gray zone shrinked and Russia was forced to move away. As for the Bakhmut situation, I think Ukraine is getting ready for the main jump to take 3 of the villages under control: Kurdymovka, Klishivka and also Andriivka over here. I did expect the liberation of those territories the last week, but unfortunately we need more time for the preparation. On the south, no changes over here, no changes over here. However, from what I know, Russia tries to regain the positions near to Robotine unsuccessfully for now.
So, what's very interesting about everything he said is now that we're a year and a half into this war, or approaching a year and a half into this war, everything moves a lot slower. Although there's still bombing and there's still, very overwhelming things to look at, we have more slow progress. It's not, Russia storming into Ukraine or intense pushbacks. They kind of have the battle lines formed, and right now it seems like Ukraine is winning that battle along the front lines. Maybe with little progression, but they have strong defensive boundaries, and if they're pushing the Russian forces back, that could be a good sign. However, again, this is a slow process, so this is a very day-by-day kind of watch and see what happens kind of deal on the front lines at this point.
Tries to regain the positions near to Robotine unsuccessfully for now. We have the video of the cluster munitions that were supplied to Ukrainian army. Yes, sometimes they rapidly load it on the truck because our guys need to deliver them very fast, but it's quite safe to transport those in that way. Fantastic job on the south front lines by the Ukrainian drones and artillery. They targeted the special electronic warfare station and the air defense system Buk. I see just a couple of the missiles on the Buk system. It means it fired 2 of them. Firstly, the station was targeted, and later on the Buk itself with big kaboom. If you see those traces coming from the explosion is quite big. It means that it is probably the explosion of the air defense rockets. It is basically the rocket fuel burning, and some of the debris delivered very high over the ground. About the star,
that's on the south front lines, he was saying, which means that was where there was very little progression. However, he was saying on the south front lines they had very strong defense. It seems as though, on the south front lines with little progression, Ukraine is still making some waves and still, targeting and destroying some big Russian defenses that could eventually open a window to push them back on the southern front lines. So even in the place where it seems like Ukraine has the least amount of progress, it seems as though they're still being very effective. Now this is obviously from the Ukrainian perspective, and we'll get more on the Russian perspective as we continue coverage, but for now it's looking good for Ukraine. But
Mayorsk village that was liberated a couple of days ago, the Russian propaganda says that they retook the control over that village. However, we don't have any kind of the clarification of that information. It was quite hard, however, for Ukraine to liberate Staromayorsk because it was mined totally. We'll see how the situation will go over there, but I do not expect Russian advancement towards that village. Let me briefly show you why. So this is the Staromayorsk, and Russians were repelled from this area. So to go back, they need to cross this river. So the only possible way for them to get control over this village is from this direction. But it is a well-predicted direction for the Russian attack, so our guys know what to expect. And I'm 90% sure that Ukraine will hold Staromayorsk and continue the assault towards the nearby villages. There was the drone attack on the Moscow city this night, and the main office building in the central part of the city was targeted. However, Ukraine has almost nothing to do with it because Russia again confirmed that they intercepted the drone using electronic warfare. What that special equipment does, it causes the disorientation of the navigation systems of the drones, and drones may go to any kind of the place. So it wasn't really the target of the drone. What I think personally, that Russia should give up their attempts to shut down the Ukrainian drones, otherwise they'll have many more casualties, and basically it's inhumane to use that electronic warfare against Ukrainian drones. The drones should
I don't know that it's inhumane. However, I do understand where he's coming from. What he's saying is that by intercepting these drones electrically, essentially it disrupts, like he said, their navigation. It doesn't really know where its target is and just ends up crashing somewhere random. In this case, it was into an office building, so that probably has civilian casualty implications, and that's very damaging to Russia. I mean, while you're fighting a war, you know, Ukraine is obviously seemingly on the counterattack these days. And when you're preventing counterattack, the least thing you want to do is put, you know, civilians at risk. But you also don't want to completely implode your military operation by letting drones come in and potentially blow up very valuable assets. So I think the more appropriate action, other than calling it inhumane, is Russia needs to find a more effective way of stopping the Ukrainian drones.
should be free to proceed and target the military targets. By the way, the full videos are available on my Telegram channel. You may find it in the video description just below. This evening there was one more kaboom in Taganrog. However, locals reported that it's not the Ukrainian drone, it is the Russian one. You see, Taganrog is the base for some of the Russian Orion attack drones. So one of the drones somehow lost control and hit the residential area. No any casualties were reported, neither in Moscow nor in Taganrog, by the way. According to the Wagner maps, Klishchiv.
That's a very interesting way to look at drones, because now we're looking at a drone that was hacked. I'm not sure if it's easy or not, but it is possible, and I'm sure, you know, most advanced militaries have that technology, along with the fact that Russia's own drones essentially glitched out and caused harm to their own equipment. So drones seem like a very new, important piece of warfare. I'm sure they've been used for a while, but they seem to become more of a key piece of warfare. However, they still seem to have a lot of bugs and issues, and seemingly they're a lot more easily intercepted or to have an issue than to necessarily be effective. I'd have to do more research on that, and we will. However, if that is the case, it's going to be interesting to watch drone warfare continue to unplay.
Ivka village is in the gray area. This is near to the Bakhmut city. They say on their resource that there is the fighting ongoing in that village. However, on the deep state military map, the part of the village is controlled by the Russian Federation. Well, Ukraine took the very important hills around, so I think that the liberation of Klishchiivka is just a matter of time. Our drone commander Madar says that Russia found out the way how to deal with the Starlink connection. They provide the special interference devices on the front lines, so they may potentially block the communication for the Ukrainian army. We use Starlinks quite a lot.
Starlink is the internet source from Elon Musk used by satellites, which means that Ukraine's essentially satellite internet is being intercepted by Russia. I'm sure that has a lot of implications on drone warfare amongst other technological warfare. So that's got to be something to watch out for. The world relies so heavily on the internet for not just, you know, the warfare side of things, but the strategic part of things as well. So it should be interesting to watch how that continues.
It is a big issue, and I think that investigations should be started in the United States of America how this technology information leaked to the Russian side. Because without the leak, I don't think that Russia would be capable to develop the special systems to seize down the Starlink. And based on the rhetorics that is coming from the Starlink manager Elon Musk, I think they have some sort of the allies in Russia. A very interesting information shared by some of the British media resources.
Before we get into Crimea, I want to address essentially war crimes for the leaks, I think is what he is referring to. The United States, the UN as a whole, has already, essentially charged Russia, Putin, many generals with several war crimes. I think that's a large reason the war will continue, because when the war ends, the accountability will be more easily had against Russian leaders. So, yeah, you could implement more war crimes if it broke some war laws. However, that's probably already in the works. It's just not, you're not going to be able to, take them to trial during the war.
And later on by other media resources that Ukrainian special forces are going through the training in the United Kingdom to further perform the sabotage actions in Crimea. So they say that Ukraine is going to attempt the liberation of Crimea. It could be the scenario as we saw from the Russian side in 2014. To perform that, first of all, Ukrainian army should reach the border with Crimea. Also, the main supply line, the Kerch Bridge, should be cut. In that case, some of the special forces of Ukrainian army may land in Crimea and encircle only the Russian bases, cutting communication between those bases and force them to surrender. It could be one of the scenarios, but I don't think that Ukraine is capable to implement it in the nearby future, because first of all we need to break through the Russian defense lines on the south. But we have some of the good news about the Russian defense lines. They are getting weaker and weaker day by day. We have the report from...
It's been a while, if you follow the channel at all, which I'm sure not many do, since we've been involved in the coverage. And I thought Crimea was to the south, but this is kind of my confirmation. And as we talked about the southern front lines, it would make sense that Russia would probably put their strongest defense in the south. Crimea was their largest point of attack, I would argue, at the beginning of the war, and they overtook that and kind of maintained that. With that being said, the fact that we saw, the airstrikes against the air defense system, I think it was a drone strike against the air defense system on the southern border, and some slight progression, even though the southern front lines is the front lines with the least amount of progression. I think that's very telling, because Russia would seemingly, like I said, put their strongest defenses on the southern front lines.
Times about it. Why is it happening? Because Ukraine started to use more long-range missiles to target the Russian supply hubs, also cutting the very important bridge connections. So there are three possible scenarios for Ukraine. First one is to go to Tokmak and Melitopol and further on to Crimea. The second one is to go to Mariupol. In that case, we should cut the Russian army in two, cut supply lines for this part of the Russian Federation. In that case, Ukrainian army wouldn't be able to go to Crimea, but we're gonna cut the Russian army into two parts. This scenario is quite unrealistic as for me, because Russia has the short supply lines to their land. In that case, they may send reinforcements from the Russian Federation territory as well as from the self-proclaimed republics. The third variant is...
I would agree that's not a great strategy. I'm not a war expert, I'm not a war general, I'm not even a private, so you can take this with a grain of salt. However, I would imagine if you split the Russian army, unless you had a massive amount of soldiers going there, you're kind of just pinning yourself in from all sides, because Russia's going to be able to come from this bottom area that starts with a C. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. It's like its own little island. They have the left side, they have the right side, and if they fight well enough, they could just box them in, cut off their supply lines, and just keep them in a box, retake it, along with massive casualties amongst other things. I think regardless, and we'll listen to the third plan as well, this whole plan will take a long time. Getting to Crimea is not going to be, handed to them by any means. Russia is definitely going to try to stand their ground. However, I think with the leadership that we've seen and, the ability to slowly push the boundary, do see the first option as a possibility in time.
is to get control over the territories near to the Bakhmut and in Donetsk. I'm honestly out of clue what this potentially may give to Ukraine from the strategic point of view. Plus, the Russian defense lines in this territory are as strong as, for example, over here in the first variant. Well, here for now, probably Ukraine gonna encircle the Bakhmut city. It's the best case scenario from what I see. The second main goal is to try to get to Crimea. Again, Russia launched their airplanes and we have air sirens all around Ukrainian territory. Now we have some good news about the Starlink. Pentagon ordered the special antennas for Ukraine. Those particular devices will have the special settings available for the Pentagon officials only. So the Starlink company will not be able to operate, restrict, or do something else with those antennas.
How do I feel about that? I think that's obviously, on a base level, really nice. Make sure that Ukraine has their Starlink, they stay in communications, the obvious stuff. However, we talked about probably a year ago about calling Russia's bluff. They, said they were going to declare war on NATO if we continue to supply them with supplies. And I think that while the bluff was called, you can't say whether it's been a bluff or not. You still have China ramping up forces, meetings with India amongst other countries. We'll talk about, I believe even a little bit in this video, Russia and North Korea working together a bit. It does set up for an interesting situation. However, when the war first started, what's really coming to my mind is that we were hesitant to send, rockets, for example, over to Ukraine because we didn't want to piss off Russia. And now we're happily sending pretty much any and everything Ukraine needs. Now, I'm not against that. I think that when we're looking at the scale right now, Russia's underperformed, underwhelmed, and almost proven themselves as a, mediocre at best army, but definitely not looking like a world power by any means. I can see why we're willing to be more loose about sending them supplies, satellites, cluster mines, potentially airplanes, as to where we used to be hesitant, but it is definitely an interesting change of pace from where we started at in this war.
Are the awesome news, and from what I understood, Ukraine has been receiving those antennas for quite a while. Before, definitely the signal over the eastern part of Ukraine was slowed down for purpose. So now the signal works fine.
Sorry to pause so quickly, but if they've been receiving it for a while and it's being intercepted, then does that mean that they have the ability to intercept Pentagon signals if they wanted to? Are there levels to these satellites or access? There are definitely questions involved with that, along with the fact of how much news is it if they're intercepting the satellites anyway, or was both pieces of news just kind of wrongly put in here, misinterpretedly? I'm not totally sure. We'll have to look more into that eventually as well.
Fine for Ukrainians. However, as I said to you in this video, Russia found out some of the electronic warfare that may block the signal. This is a very important tool for the Ukrainian communication. The Russian tank T-80 was found on a private property in Sumy region. After Russia ran away from the place, they left some of the tanks and armored vehicles out there. So one of the locals took it to his own household, and this tank was under the cover for 1 year, but finally was exposed by someone, and now it is sent to the Ukrainian army. Probably the owner of the property wanted to save the tank for the self-defense. A group of German politicians, together with the military officials of Germany, asked Chancellor Scholz to approve the transfer of the Taurus long-range cruise missiles to Ukraine. Those are very similar to the Storm Shadow cruise missiles. Ukraine needs this weaponry a lot, and finally I think that we're gonna get it. At least I saw the information about the possible transfer of those missiles to Ukrainian army from many of the resources. But
sending cruise missiles, I guess that's where we're at in this war. It just starts to feel more and more like a proxy war. the more and more weaponry we send and the more we supply the war, and the more and more America seemingly fighting Russia. And it's not just America, our allies are too. You could argue it's NATO as a whole. I understand. It just seems like
will happen the same as with the Leopard tanks. After the United States approved the transfer of Abrams, Germany approved the transfer of Leopards, so United States firstly need to approve the transfer of ATACMS long-range missiles. And after it, Germany will follow the decision. Probably Chancellor Scholz doesn't want to take the responsibility for the action. I like the United Kingdom over here. They don't really care and supply Ukraine with everything they want. First heavy tanks and first Storm Shadows. We are also grateful for other allies who supply the military units to Ukraine. I'm speaking about just the approach over here. Let's talk about the possible attempt of the Wagner Group to go between Poland and Lithuania to reach the Russian Federation in Kaliningrad Oblast. So we know that Wagner landed their forces near to Hrodna city. They're a little bit more than 100 infantry personnel. Let's zoom into this area. As you can see, it's covered by swamps, woods. This type of terrain actually may hide the advancement of the Wagner forces, especially the small groups of the soldiers. So here, close to the border, they may disperse their forces for not more than 5 people in the group. And later on, they may perform some sabotage act somewhere in Poland or Lithuania. Poland and Lithuania knows that, that's why they reinforced the border between them and Belarus. As for reaching the Russian Federation, let's measure the distance. It's 68 kilometers. It's very hard to do without any kind of vehicles or airplanes across this very hard terrain. There are so many swamps, lakes, the soil is very soft sometimes, so it's very hard to proceed. But the goal for Russia is not to create this some sort of the corridor between Belarus and the Russian Federation. No, they want just to destabilize the situation in the NATO country, to try it. So they may say that it is not the offensive operation, it's just some random private Wagner force. It could be a very tricky situation, especially for Poland, because Russia is very aggressive towards that country. But Poland, as for me, is getting ready for the war. I think that probably it's the only country in Europe that arms its forces that fast. They have lots of the tanks and airplanes in order. They already expand their military and the plan is to increase it by 100%. So Poland will double its army. If I speak
it's a lot to take in for sure. The Wagner Group going from Belarus to get into the Russian, territory right there. I'm trying to understand, because from my understanding, Wagner Group is trying to destabilize the Russian Federation, and it seems weird to me that Poland and Lithuania would be trying to stop that, I guess. Maybe they don't want the battle so close to their other border, because then... But that just doesn't seem to make as much sense to me as it does that the Wagner Group is going to create an issue for Poland and Lithuania. And he said that they're going to sabotage somewhere in there. I want to watch and see what happens with that. The last point I want to make about it is it's a group of 100 people. The only two things I really have to say about it is A, it's not like they're fighting their way through all of Poland and Lithuania, and B, they could hide their way through there, but then what? They're gonna fight how many Russian soldiers? A few thousand at least, right? So, I mean, I know battles can go a certain way, and maybe they're some of the greatest mercenaries in the world, but... And I don't even know that that's true. I'm saying even if they are, hypothetically, it seems kind of like just a suicide mission. Poland itself, Lithuania, and I believe Finland also, there's been discussion about them, have been gearing for war. I'm kind of curious why. The war's been in Belarus. It's been in Ukraine. It seems like it's been increasing a bit in Russia, and we'll get more into that as time goes on. But are they going to join the war out of necessity? Are they joining the war out of fear? Are they trying to strike first? And if they join the war, is that kind of giving the nod for everyone else or others to join the war? These are all kind of questions that opens up to me.
About the possible military operation that Russia might perform in Poland or try to perform, they would fail. However, as I say to you about the small sabotage acts that they may perform, they may actually get some success in the area which is close to the border. Luckily, Poland knows about it, and from the information we obtain, they sent lots of the reinforcements to this area. My friends, don't forget to press the like to this video, it helps me a lot, and also if you want to support my job, there are some links available just in the video description below. Special thanks for my Patreon supporters and for my sponsors on the YouTube channel. You're doing a fantastic job. Many thanks.
Make sure to check them out. I really enjoyed this video. I think it gave a good, overview of what's going on in the war. There's a lot of stuff to dig into, and we're going to dig into it. We're going to dig into a lot of it today. We're going to dig in more of it tomorrow, and we'll keep on documenting what's happening, forming a more educated opinion, and bringing you the news. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for tuning into the Martin Dreyfus Show, and I guess that's it.